Every day I fight the urge to just go. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while since my last upload, but as I said, university is starting back up and I don't have as much time as I used to have. But if you want to see my videos more regularly and even more videos that you currently don't have access to, there's always my Patreon. Annoying YouTuber plug, I know. But anyways, I'm here today to talk about cleansing and protecting in German folk magic. As we enter into the dark half of the year, these specific types of magic become ever more prevalent and important, at least in a German folk magic framework. Because traditionally this was believed to be the time where malevolent spirits are most active. So the entire fall and winter seasons are basically littered with different ways to protect yourself. And I want to discuss some of these ways today. So first off, what even is cleansing magic? In very short terms, when we talk about cleansing in the spiritual online community, we talk about the cleansing of a specific space, object, or person from different types of energies or entities. This can be cleansing a room after a big fight to kind of reset the vibe in a way, but also be cleansing someone of a sickness. At least in German folk magic, that was something that was traditionally done. Now, many traditions use the smoke of burning herbs for cleansing, but also things such as holy waters or special tinctures, or sound cleansing through bells and such, or even just prayers. In my tradition, special colognes are sometimes also used to get rid of unwanted energies. So basically, the ways in which you ward and cleanse yourself will be specific to your path and culture. My tradition has aspects of each of these different types of cleansing method. But remember that the way that we do smoke cleansing in German folk magic will be drastically different to how smoke cleansing would be performed in, for example, Native American traditions. So let's just start with that. Let's talk about smoke cleansing in German folk magic. There are three main factors when it comes to how we do these things. Firstly, when and how you gather the necessary materials to make smoke cleansing happen. Secondly, how you take care of these materials that you've gathered. And thirdly, how exactly you're going to use these materials in your smoke cleanse. So let's focus on the first factor for a bit. In German folk magic, there are specific auspicious days which are considered to be extremely potent for gathering herbs or any materials necessary for smoke cleansing. Besides herbs, these could also be things such as bark or wood or a special kind of resins. Besides the natural cycles of these materials when they become ripe and ready to be gathered, there are also things to consider such as moon phases. So for example, herbs are typically gathered during a waxing moon when their strength increases, or alternatively the full moon. Then of course the already mentioned auspicious days come in. So for example, St. John's wort, a very common herb used in this type of cleansing, is gathered on the day of St. John, the 24th of June. Generally, all herbs are thought to be especially potent during this time, and if you can combine the general time frame of the St. John's celebration with a waxing moon, that would be even more ideal. But of course, not every herb or plant is ripe around that time, so we have more auspicious days in the following harvest season where herbs are being gathered, mainly in the days between the Assumption of Mary and Michaelmas. So from the 15th of August to around the 29th of September. Also, when it comes to the rituals associated to the herb gathering, some taboos are typically observed. For example, being completely silent when you gather them. And this often isn't just restricted to the act of cutting the herbs from the fields, for example, but also already begins when you wake up on that day. So you wake up, get ready to gather the herbs, you don't talk to anyone, you don't talk to anyone on the street that might come across and see you, you don't talk during the herb gathering, and oftentimes you go back home in complete silence. Some regions, other taboos are also observed, for example, that you should not see any artificial light during this process. I'm not quite sure why that is, but who am I to question age-old tradition? Also, a lot of the times these herbs should be gathered before the first signs of the sunrise. So before any light from the sun touches the plants, they should already be gathered. If you want to be really fancy, you could use the folkloric ascribed golden knife to cut them. I personally don't have a golden knife, so I'm just using my elementary school scissors. I mean, they still work great, so why change it? But also bear in mind that this is just a big generalizations. So every kind of region or even sometimes village will have their unique way of doing things. For example, in my region, herbs are being gathered on the Thursday morning before the Assumption of Mary. And there's also a list of specific herbs that we here gather particularly. And this is very different to how things might be done a few kilometers further east or west or something like that. Also, if you want to have more information on this particular tradition of my village, I'll link a podcast episode where I talk about this in the video description. Okay, so this is the gathering part. Now we have the taking care of the materials part. Now there's a mundane aspect to it, which consists of properly drying or preparing the herbs so that they don't get moldy or lose their potence. And there is a spiritual aspect to it. So oftentimes people would talk to the herbs or materials directly as if they were a living person. And this again goes hand in hand with animism, the belief that everything in nature kind of has its own spirit and essence that can be communicated with. A really good example of how this prayer to the herbs might work is recorded in the Anglo-Saxon 9 herbs charm. And I know it's Anglo-Saxon, i.e. English and not German, but we are related peoples and thus also related practices exist in both regions. You often see that a plant is addressed directly for its qualities and is then asked to bring these qualities to aid whatever its purpose is later going to be. For example, in our case, smoke cleansing. So for example, if you would have a mint plant, you could be like, oh, mint plant, you are so cleansing, you smell and taste so refreshing. Please bring this refreshing cleansing quality to my smoke cleansing spell later on. This is a very rough example, but I hope you get the gist. Now the third part is actually using the herbs. Typically after the herbs are gathered and dried, they are bound up in something that's called a Würzbüschel, which basically just translates to spice bush. And then they are being hung in the attic, and there they work kind of as a talisman of sorts to ward off any negative energy from the homestead. But a lot of the times these herbs are then also used to smoke cleanse afterwards. And personally, I haven't seen a lot of records where the bundle itself is being kind of lit and smoke cleansed with. What I see more often is that the herbs themselves are being crushed and then used as sort of loose incense. And then this incense would be burnt in a fireproof dish and the smoke would kind of be fanned across the home, where each room is kind of visited by the person doing the smoke cleansing, so that every stagnant energy from every corner would kind of be pushed out. Again, there are auspicious days for this smoke cleansing to take place, which make it especially potent or especially necessary. For example, a big period would be the Rauhnächte, which is the period from Christmas to Epiphany. This is like the height of the German folk magical spiritual season. And often these smoke cleansing rituals themselves are being paired with some kind of protection prayer. Now, speaking of prayers, there are also some folk magical prayers and spells which directly relate to protecting the home. For example, in the folk magical grimoire from Albertus Magnus, which is called Egyptian Secrets, which aren't actually Egyptian, but this is an entirely different conversation, a spell talks of kind of making a protective ring across the house, and the spell is then repeated 3 Fridays in a row. Another aspect of cleansing and warding in German folk magic is sound cleansing, or as I would call it, more noise cleansing. Most of you have probably already heard of the Bavarian or southern German tradition of having Pärchenläufe, where a lot of people go through villages dressed as demons and they have typically a lot of bells around them or bound to them and they jingle and make a lot of fuss and stuff. This is to scare off any winter spirits or generally evil spirits away from where the people live. Also, sometimes songs go together with this type of cleansing, but not always. And basically, as long as you can make a lot of noise, for example, banging a few pots together, you should be fine. Just make sure to not annoy your neighbors while doing that. In northern Germany, there's this tradition of the Rummelpott, which looks like this and sounds like this.
Fietsje maakt de deur op, de rommelpot is door. Lieschen maakt de deur op, let een rommel in.
But making a Rummelpott or dressing up as a Pärchen might not be the most accessible thing, so again, pots and pans, it is. For most of us, probably. Also, some waters are considered to ward off any negative entities. Of course, we have the classic holy water that you gather at church. And no, you don't have to be a Christian to use this. I personally don't consider myself a Christian, just a folk magic practitioner. And in my branch of folk magic, Christian, or more specifically Catholic things, still play a big role. So even though I don't really pray to God anymore and focus more on deities, ancestors, and saints, this is still valuable to me. And you could do things such as add a few drops to your floor wash, or dip your fingers in it and then draw some sigils on your mirrors, windows, or doors, or anoint yourself with it. There's of course the typical dipping a finger in it and then making the sign of the cross on your forehead. There's also dipping a bit on your neck or some parts of your clothes, or if you wear veils, that would be an option to kind of wet it a bit with holy water, so you can really get creative with this. Also, I already mentioned special colognes that might be useful. In my branch of folk magic, this 4711 original cologne is used most often, and this deserves its entire video or blog post, and I might do this one day, but essentially its use is similar to what you might do with holy water. Lastly, there's also this German folk magical concept of Unruhe, which means unrest, and the thought behind that is if you have something in constant movement, in constant unrest, that would also deter any negative entities from coming too close to you. Basically, the same logic applied to like a moving scarecrow is also applied to spirits here. So there's this tradition of, for example, taking an eggshell and putting a few paper wings on it and hanging it on your ceiling to have it kind of move a bit when you, for example, touch it, or the wind hits it when you open your window, so that it's kind of in a semi-constant state of movement, which would be the unrest. Of course, there are many other ways of protecting, warding, and cleansing in German folk magic, but only so much that I can cover in this video. But I still hope that this helped you somewhat and gave you some inspiration for your own practice. And with that, we come to my Patreon shoutouts. I wish you have a great rest of your day, and 𝔖𝔭𝔬𝔢𝔨𝔢𝔫𝔨𝔀𝔢𝔀𝔢